My oldest son was 5 and he was going to be going into kindergarten. But before that summer, he wanted to go to this science camp, and it was a day camp. And then the day of, I show up and there's just like all of these teenagers who were counselors, like volunteer counselors. And I almost went into like hyper panic. Like I was like, got back into my car after I dropped him off. I almost didn't leave him because I was so freaked out. And I just had like a panic attack. And I didn't really understand why. I mean, like most of the parents that I was seeing drop off their kids were like happy to get rid of them for the day. You know, it was like, thank goodness, here you go, have my child, you know. And I just felt like, why am I so suspicious? Why can't I trust? My mom was born in 1937, and she was born in El Salvador, which at the time, I think it still is quite a religious country, like most Latin American countries. And so the idea of sex before marriage, like that whole thing is still, you know, like there's still a lot of slut shaming and this idea of like, if you're not pure, and, you know, like purity culture is very strong. And so when she was 14 years old, she was raped by a school teacher. And the school teacher threatened her to not tell anyone, and that even if she did tell, they wouldn't believe her, and that she would be blamed because he would say that she like seduced him or something. She also was very much shamed because now she was no longer a virgin, and she thought that nobody would want to marry her and that her parents would disown her, and like there was this huge fear around that. So she carried the secret with her pretty much her whole life. The only other person that she told was my dad once they were married. And my dad ended up turning this around and using it as another reason to abuse my sister. She remembers him telling her that he had a right to do this to her because my mom was not a virgin and he had been deceived when he married her. I was about I think around 9 years old, the first time that I remember my dad inappropriately touching me. And that was one of the first memories that I have of my dad. I definitely second-guessed myself a lot because my memories were so fragmented. I knew that it had happened to my sister because she had disclosed what had happened to her many years before. And I remember when she told us that it wasn't even a shock to me. It was like, oh yeah, that makes sense that my dad would have done that. And immediately believed her, and it just made sense. But it didn't like come to me that he had also done it to me too. I had suppressed all those memories. I had like bits and pieces of information that I remembered. Some of it I thought were dreams, others they just didn't make sense. And then I started going to therapy because I was like, there's something else going on. And knowing what I knew about my sister, I started suspecting that like maybe I had all these buried memories because it also had happened to me. And through therapy, I pieced it all together, and I realized that it did indeed happen. And a lot of the things started to make sense of like why I was afraid of him, why I remember him coming up to my, starting to go up the stairs to my room and like freezing and freaking out. And my dog, who fortunately, like we had a new dog and slept under my bed, started to bark, and I could hear the steps going back down. and just having this like tremendous sense of relief. But like it never really made sense. It's like, why would I be afraid of my dad coming to my room, right? Like unless there was something. We were supposed to go to this trip to go to Disney, and my dad had won, like through his work, he had won 2 tickets. And because we only had 2 tickets, it was going to be just my dad and I. And I just remember when he told me that it was just the 2 of us going, my gut just felt like dread. Like I just thought, I don't want to go. Like I just was trying to find any excuse to tell my mom, like, I don't want to go. When we got to the hotel, I told myself, like, I just can't fall asleep. Just don't fall asleep, and that way you'll be fine. And I would try to stay awake. I would just, like sleep in, there were 2 beds in the room, and I would try to sleep facing away from him and like just staying awake. And I remember waking up in the morning mad at myself that I had fallen asleep. Knowing who he is and how he had fooled everybody in our community when I was growing up. Like he was a churchgoer and he was really charming and everybody thought he was such a great guy, and he was able to like cover up the fact that he was a drug addict and alcoholic and that he was a child molester. I mean, people had no idea. So I just feel like it would be very easy for him to groom whoever it is that and just be able to lie very deceptively. He denied that he had done anything to me. So again, and that kind of was like, made me actually second guess myself. It's like, maybe he didn't do anything. It's like, he's just so believable that he actually made me second guess myself for a second. But the piece that really pissed me off was that he had said, whatever happened in the past with your sister, and I'm a changed person. Like, I think he's become like an evangelist. Like he's like in some evangelical church and, just hiding away in there, like trying to look like a good person. And regardless of whether he's changed his ways or not, he still committed these crimes when we were younger. And so there's a fear of like, are people going to not believe us and take his word instead? I think that there was probably a bit of shame of like the dysfunctionality of my home, of my family. I also know that like my dad, because he was a drug addict and he was an alcoholic and he was a womanizer. Like he was always cheating on my mom, and I believe like even just being, I think that I was probably a product of rape. Like I think people forget that there is rape within marriage, like that is a thing. And I think most of the experiences my mom had with my dad were like that, unfortunately. So knowing all these things about who he was and who he is, there was a lot of shame about him being my father. Like I really wanted to talk about it. Like I really wanted to like dismantle the shame around it. The only person really who should feel any shame is the perpetrator, right? The offender. And so that was like the calling for me, was to talk more specifically about that. But at the same time, I was obviously going to talk about my family because it's my dad and it's my sister. And obviously it's my mom, who people would maybe think like, well, how did she not know? Or why didn't she do anything? And so I knew that there would be like scrutiny around, all of us, right? And so there was a lot of fear of that, but at the same time, I really felt emboldened by the fact that like none of us really did anything wrong. So why should we have shame. And that was really the message that kept driving me, like calling me to speak up about it. And once I finally did, it felt so liberating. And I was really surprised to see the community that ended up building because of it. It wasn't something that divided us or made us feel bad. It actually turned into a support system of sorts, and both for our family as well as for the people who related to what we went through. For a lot of parents who are survivors, when they don't talk about this, they rob themselves, of course, of being able to heal, because they never tell anyone, and they have so much guilt and shame and all of those things that they struggle with. But they also don't talk to anybody and educate themselves about it, because they fear the topic, and they think, if I start educating myself, then people are going to know that something happened to me, and that's why I'm looking at this information or worried about this. So when they don't talk about it and they don't share about it and they don't learn about it, they have misinformation about how abuse happens. And to my mom, she only ever thought that abuse happened outside of the home, because for her it was with a teacher. So she was always worried about outside of the home and strangers and teachers and anyone who wasn't inside the home. So she missed all the signs with our dad. And that, unfortunately, is really common for a lot of survivors. I think it's striving to go from survivor to thriver. For a really long time, I really connected to that word, survivor, but it never fully sat well with me, because I didn't want to stay in survivor mode. I didn't want to constantly feel like at any moment I'm gonna get triggered, and at any moment something is gonna break me down. I also didn't want my dad to win, and I think that was a big part of my commitment to my own healing. So to me, healing is being on the journey of going from survivor to thriver, and not wanting to ever give up on that journey. I think I'm lucky in the fact that I don't remember a lot, and it's actually made my healing easier. But for someone like my sister, it's been really excruciating. And it's not linear. I keep thinking, oh, I've gotten to a place where I'm really good, and then something will really trigger it. It's a lot less and few in between now, those periods, but they still pop up, and it's just a reminder oh, that's another area that I still need to work on. Even if you never get to the finish line, you're still moving, you're still on that path, and you're still experiencing joy along the way. So to me, healing is getting closer to making joy a bigger and bigger part of my life. Once I decided I'm going to educate myself, get certified, and be able to start teaching this, I did so without talking about the fact that I was a survivor. And it was still fine, it was good, but what I really quickly realized is that there's two types of parents. There's parents who are clueless because they've never experienced it, and they're coming at this information from a very different perspective, versus parents who are survivors who are acutely aware of the problem. If you don't know that this is a big issue, then I have to kind of convince you that it's something you need to pay attention to, because they have the mentality of not my kid, not my kid, not my town, not my school, not my backyard. And on the other hand, parents who are aware are thinking that the danger is everywhere. And to just say, like, I see you and the challenges you're going through, and there's ways to get through this and to navigate it and to come out the other side full of hope and healing instead of fear and anxiety. And so as I continue to do it, like it's what makes me get out of bed every day.